Xal'Atath. Today, I'm going to make it all make sense. So, as a character, right, she's been by our side since Legion. Sometimes as a blade in our hand, sometimes watching from the shadows, and sometimes just attacking us with everything that she's got, as with, say, Khaz-Algar. Through all of this, one thing's real clear, right? And it's that Xal'Atath serves herself and nobody else. As an example, when we first met her, our goals aligned. Then we drifted apart. Then we had a passionate fling. Then we lost touch. And when she finally returned, we found ourselves in her way. That's the plot of The War Within. But now in patch 11.2, the coin has flipped again, where Xal'Atath actually is on our side. And I've seen eyes roll at this, but seriously, in-game, with the actual campaign, it does work. And it also fits her characterization. I mean, seriously, look at her dialogue since Legion. You might be wondering why. And what we discussed today is going to compound on previous lore, and it'll really all shine quite clear. I've also got a bit of a challenge for you. Give me 30 minutes, and with today's sponsor, you'll finally have the website that you've been meaning to build. So Squarespace has an easy-to-use site builder and award-winning templates, but they have developed so much as a platform lately. Design Intelligence is their mix of tools that help you access their 20 years of design experience easily. It starts with Blueprint AI, and that starts with a few questions. Once you answer those, you'll use their interactive design system to build your own template, just the way that you like it, but with them keeping you right, with designer-picked fonts and color palettes, all matched to your aesthetic, and then from there, you can iterate on your copy and your content. It's all seamlessly integrated, and if you've just been overwhelmed in the past, or you just want to start quickly with all of your bases covered, this set of features is literally made for you. And their core platform is always growing as well. They've got native video support, so you can have a gorgeous player, you can have video gallery layouts that are all interoperable with their e-commerce tools. It's real impressive, and when I needed sites, Squarespace was my first port of call because they make it easy. So, to get started today, go to squarespace.com/BellularGaming, check out Design Intelligence, and when you're ready to send your site live, use code BellularGaming for 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. So, the overall reason why she's doing all of this is pretty simple. It's freedom. She hates Dimensius. She's been hiding from his shattered form for hundreds of thousands of years. But now, in 11.2, Dimensius is going to be back, and that means that she is in big trouble. Now, why are we accepting the help from Xal'Atath, someone who does appear to be our enemy? Well, it's because if we don't stop Dimensius on Koresh, he'll come for Azeroth next. Xal tells us as much when she says, "It's what I would do if I was a Void Lord." And that is definitely quite suspicious. I mean, she's right. I'm sure that is what she would do if she is a Void Lord. But we need to think about that if, because that line should fill us with dread. My reasoning is that it's a window into our future, and it's obvious that that is her final ambition. Okay, let's start this off by getting oriented in the lore. So, it's the War Within. Illyria in this expansion tells us that Xal'Atath is not an old god, that she is in fact a survivor from the depths of time, which is all very weird and mysterious. Anyway, Xal'Atath then went and got the Dark Heart cracked. That's whenever Illyria shot it with an arrow. She then, of course, went to Undermine, went to the goblins to get it fixed because the goblins are the people who initially made it. But that is when, of course, those ethereals came in and they swiped it from her. Now, the next major thing that happens is in patch 11.1.7's new lore walking feature. In one of those quests, we discover that Locust Walker, who is of course Illyria's mentor, and Venari, one of the characters from the Shadowlands, one of the ones we actually liked, that they actually knew each other in the past, and they had worked together. Now, at the end of that quest chain, Locust Walker says that they would have much to discuss. That's not all he says. He also goes to visit another potential ally in the fight against Dimensius. So, that's where 11.1.7 left things off. Now we're moving into patch 11.2, where, in 11.2, the Shadowguard Ethereal had stolen the Darkheart from Xal'Atath. They took it to Koresh, and their intent is to use it to reform Dimensius, this big, spooky Voidlord creature. Now, what do I mean whenever I say reform? It's actually fairly simple. Dimensius was fragmented during the Devouring War. That's the name of the war that destroyed the world of Koresh. Now, since then, the Shadowguard have been gathering these various different fragments of Dimensius, one day hoping to put them back together again. Though, of course, years ago, we actually bumped into one of those. That's what happened whenever we fought Dimensius in the Burning Crusade, which I suppose for Blizzard is a handy way of unifying all of this with the legacy lore. But back to the story at hand. Since then, they've gathered enough of these fragments to try to bring Dimensius back, and the final ingredient is, of course, the Dark Heart's power. Now, before we venture to Koresh and kick off the patch, Locust Walker drops an absolute bombshell, and that is that the Brokers are also refugees from the destruction of Koresh. The difference between the Brokers and the Ethereals, as it turns out, is that the Brokers went to the Shadowlands. They wanted to go there, but to survive its environment, they needed to fashion stronger containment suits. So, stronger than the usual arcane bandages that the Ethereals use. Anyway, that happens, and then we arrive on Koresh. The Broker city of Tazavesh is already there. It's protected by immense arcane shields, and it's also in chaos. Locust Walker told the Brokers that we are the help that he had promised, but he's actually hiding something kind of important here. So anyway, we clear the city of Shadowguard infiltration, obviously something that Locust Walker was already aware of. And if you were wondering how he was aware, well, we soon discover that, because as it turns out, he has had a hidden ally. Xal'Atath. Yes, Xal'Atath is his ally, and she will be our ally in patch 11 too. Should we trust her? No, absolutely not, and our characters are often quite pissed. Illyria is absolutely furious. She points out that Xal'Atath, did try to kill her. Zal just shrugs it off, saying that, hey, we've all tried to kill each other at one point in time, which I guess does make a brutal enough kind of sense for these characters. But here's the overall difference, right? Illyria has this monolithic morality, right? We're good, Zal is bad. As for Xal'Atath, well, she is just an individual agent. She is out for herself. And that both means that she isn't a threat, but she also is a massive threat. This is where we get into some of the deep waters here. You see, Xal'Atath tells us something crucial here, that without her help, Dimensius will return, and his next target will be Azeroth. Now remember what I said earlier in this video, that consuming Azeroth is what Xal'Atath says she would do if she was a Void Lord. I think there's obviously more to that statement than meets the eye. We will get to that, but for now, well, Dimensius is going to be a thing. We should really stop him, so we kind of have no choice but to work with her. We travel to the shattered remains of Koresh, and then we begin to unpick the deep story of how this world fell. After quite literally a decade and a half of waiting, we are finally having major parts of this timeline filled in. So here goes. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, Xal'Atath arrived on Koresh. She came as harbinger of Dimensius. Her mission was simple, to get on planet and create utter chaos from the shadows, and specifically to unbalance and corrupt the native races of the world. Now that's where she found the Reshi. They're a society centered around arcane magic, and they were led by the wizard king Salhadar. He would be her main target, but there were others in the world. As an example, the Oracles. They were priests who would commune with the voice of their planet's world soul. But then, piercing their society more deeply, she discovered their Revel. Now, these were a secret group of the Reshi who worked in the shadows to guide their society. So, the Illuminati, I guess. Though, if you want to keep it in universe, you could frame it as them being an alternative, more secretive take on Azeroth's Council of Six. Anyway, we learned that both Venari and Locust Walker were in this group, and much like the Council of Six, they held great power, but rather than channel it all into one single individual, as with, say, Meguin or Medivh, they inscribed it onto these Reshi Raps. Now, for Xal'Atath, this would change everything, because here's the actual truth with her. She hated Dimensius. We learned that he had done something to her in the past. We don't know what it is. Maybe he devoured whatever planet she was from, long before Koresh happened. Maybe she found herself in the rough end of the Void hierarchy. We currently don't know, though it's obviously something that's pretty bad. But whatever the case, she was effectively working for him, sent as his harbinger to herald the coming of him, the All-Devouring, with All-Devouring almost seeming like some sort of name or title for the ultimate void creature within Void. Now, the way things go down is that she sees these Reshi Raps, and she sees that they're not just little bits of cloth, they are full of power. Power that she would need. Now, you might think that's a little bit weird. Again, I would draw upon the Council of Six as a thing. Canonically, they were absurdly powerful, so it seems to me to be something similar to that, but bound up in this cloak. She wanted that cloak, so she offered the Reshi a bargain, one that ideally would give them both the freedom that they want. It went down like this. Simply, she would save them. Right? She would prevent them from being killed by Dimensius, and in return, they would kill Dimensius for her. But as with all of her bargains, there was a price to pay. what happened next is actually something we already knew. The Dimensius manifested over Koresh and began what we now know the Ethereals called the Devouring War. This is lore we've had for years and years, but with next to no detail. So, quick history lesson. Back in 2010, players could ask Chris Metzen questions on the official forum. It was called Ask CDev, and by then, we were already deep in Wrath of the Lich King, but having came off TBC, players wondered about the Ethereal's homeworld. Stuff had been set up within the Burning Crusade, but it wasn't really fleshed out. So here's what Metzen told us. The Dimensius found Koresh, that he opened countless portals to the Void and the Twisting Nether, which utterly wrecked the place. But a band of the native people hastily constructed these magic barriers that could block the Void energy from Dimensius. However, there was a problem. By then, the world had been engulfed by arcane energy that had spilled out of the Twisting Nether, and this flooded through their cities. And when it did, it destroyed their bodies, and the only way that they could hold on is in the form we see today, of those arcane bandages that quite literally hold their form together. So, that's the story of how the Reshi became the Ethereals, as far as we knew. After that, they then fought Dimensius to a standstill, but were eventually forced to flee. Then some time passes, and we meet a whole bunch of them in the Burning Crusade. Now, there are some key takeaways here. First, the Reshi's magical barriers and enchanted wraps are what turned them into the Ethereals. Second, Chris Metzen never said that Koresh was destroyed. Now, of course, Chris Metzen is back, and Blizzard are finally ready to give us the full story. Okay, back to Koresh in patch 11.2. So, Illyria doesn't trust Xal'Atath, but then Locust Walker tells her something important, that the Ethereals would not have survived if it was not for the transformation that the Harbinger, that Xal'Atath, offered. And that's the big lore drop here, right? That's where things kind of change. Because as it turns out, using the power of the Reshi Wraps, Xal'Atath was able to transform them into the Ethereals. So essentially, it is how that happened. Our previous lore didn't outright state how it happened, it just sort of implied that they were able to do it themselves somehow. Here, though, we've got a pretty clear character and mechanic behind it. And it turns out that what she uses is the same thing that we use whenever we phase dive in patch 11.2, which also means that what you're seeing on screen right now is actually what the world looks like through the eyes of a real ethereal. Anyway, what did Xal'Atath get in return, though? Because there's always a price. Well, that goes back to why Koresh was destroyed. You see, Xal'Atath says it wasn't actually her who destroyed the planet. She says that it wasn't even her secret to reveal, that we'd have to look elsewhere, but she does give us a clue that it's not Dimensius, and the reason why it wouldn't be is that whatever happened to Koresh is also what shattered the Void Lord. And so surely he wouldn't do that himself. Lyria scoffs at this, she's rightly suspicious, but Zal simply states that it's not her who's doing the lying here about what happened to Koresh. So she goes a bit more personal. She takes Illyria to the side, and she tells her to ask Locust Walker what happened. So Illyria decides to give it a shot. She confronts Locust Walker, and he owns up to what really happened. Here's what we learn from Locust Walker. As it turns out, it was the Revel who did it. That under the influence of Xal'Atath, they believed that it was the only way to destroy the Void Lord. And this was essentially their plan, to first transform their people into ethereal so they could survive the Void, and then to blow up the planet in Dimensius' face. Now, that's pretty much what we understood so far. But then something went wrong. We're a little light in the details here. I have to imagine they'll flesh it out at some point in the future. But what we do learn is that the Revel ended up performing their ritual too early. And that means they did not manage to kill Dimensius. All they ended up doing was shattering him. Now, do you remember what Locust Walker once told us? It's a bit of a deep cut, but he told us this. That if he uttered his true name, void creatures would manifest from portals and destroy him on the spot. He says that he's been hunted, that he's been hated. Venari even calls him the sinister sorcerer. So whatever it is, his people hate him for what he did. And it turns out he hates himself because he did it all in secret. So according to Xal'Atath, telling Reshi society about their plan would just have created panic. And that panic, obviously, would have been something that Dimensius would be able to feed on and become even harder to defeat. And so that is why they did what they did in secret. Now again, I've got to remind you, one of the big points here is that the whole ritual happened early, and we don't exactly know why, but we can obviously infer that somehow it's something to do with Locust Walker. Perhaps he cut a deal with Xal'Atath behind everyone else's back. We don't exactly know those details, but we do know big picture what happened. The Reshi were destroyed, becoming either ethereals or brokers. Karesh was also destroyed, and then Xal'Atath's hated master Dimensius was shattered. And you know what this basically is? A repeat of what she has done time and time again with countless characters. She was playing them pretty much all of the time. Everything was destroyed, yet she was left free. The question, though, is free to do what? From what we currently understand, the next time Xal'Atath would appear is in the Lore Walking quest, way back in the past, whenever she arrives in Azeroth and then basically loses and is put into the Blade. We don't know if anything else happened between the fall of Karesh and whenever she arrives in Azeroth, but if we skip forward then to the patch 11.2 stuff, we can talk about how characters are thinking through her. So Venari Locust Walker and a handful of other Reshi did work with Xal'Atath back in the day, but she was never trusted, and right now Venari is of course still suspicious. But she also understands that she doesn't exactly have much of a choice here, that Xal'Atath, at least in the short term, holds the keys to their victory, that she essentially is the only hope that she's got of restoring Karesh. But obviously our partnership can only go so far. Xal'Atath is of the Void, and the Void does nothing but consume. I mean, just look at the Dimensius fight itself. One of the phases is called the Devoured Lords, and as it turns out, there are two Devoured Void Lords. Basically, beings like Dimensius, as important as him, but just never heard of them, because as it turns out, Dimensius just went and consumed them, which is of course what Void does, and if you want a mental image, think about some sort of black hole consuming your world, but, you know, far larger. That is basically the point here, that the Void consumes all until only the most powerful survive. And of course, with Dimensius truly defeated, as we must assume he will be at the end of this patch, who will take his place? That's where we think about what Xal'Atath said, and also what she's done. So think about Khazal-Gar. Xal'Atath corrupted the Awakening Machine, she subverted Nerubian Kingdom, she destroyed Dalaran, she's done so many bad things, all for her own gain. And the few times where she has been our ally, again, it's just been for her own gain. Illyria essentially is right. Xal'Atath is bad. Xal'Atath is evil. And it's all leading towards one thing. All of this brings us to this point in the video, which I've got to say, this is the deepest ocean of spoilers. If you do not want big spoiler things, go away and watch something else. Till then, though, well, this will be fun. Some alleged data mining from the end of 11.2's campaign basically reveals Xal's ultimate ambition, and of course, because it's Xal, another person who is, a casualty along the way. Now, for the sake of clarity, I'll just read this as it's written. This comes from Illyria. She killed him because he trusted her, because he understood who she really was. So this is my oath. I will hunt Xal'Atath down. I will find justice for Locust Walker. I will prevent her from becoming the new All-Devouring. This is huge, and it sets up the Midnight expansion. So we've got Locust Walker being backstabbed, and Xal'Atath wanting to be the new All-Devouring, which does pretty much track with the things she said. One of them, right, is she tells us that the Void does not transform, that it consumes. And we see this play out. As an example, her power alone was not enough to transform the ethereals. She needed the Reshi wraps. So what did she do? She got them, and then she used them to her own ends. What did we see her do in Dalaran, with Galakrond, with all of those things in War Within? She was gathering up power and putting it into the Darkheart. She is always trying to do what Void does, consume. It even goes back to the line that was used to describe the, I suppose, Void essence thing that ended up in Galakrond. And it appears all of this has been leading to her wanting to become a being as powerful as Dimensius, perhaps more powerful than Dimensius. And not because that is what she originally was. Remember, she is described as a survivor from the depths of time. That makes you wonder, what is she? Was she once a mortal who was transformed by the Void, or a creature of the Void itself? Maybe a world soul that itself fell and was diminished? We don't know. And in a way, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter whether she's an old god, an ex-mortal. It doesn't even matter that she is or is not the Harbinger. What matters is this: the board is now clear. In 11.2, we team up because we need to defeat Dimensius, but with him gone, nothing now stands in her way. and we know what she'll do next, because she told us. She will attempt to take Azeroth. Remember the coin she flicked into the Dalaran pool that said, "The soul of your world in the palm of my hand"? Well, if Valyria is right, she's going to get that to become the new All-Devouring, the new biggest thing of Void, and, well, who knows exactly what'll happen after that. I have a feeling we may just defeat her, but what if I told you that it would not be the first time she has tried with Azeroth? There was another time she did it under false pretenses, and you can learn all about it in this next video. It's the perfect complement to this one.